We're here with Mr Damian Collins, who's our local Conservative Member of Parliament for Folkestone Hythe, and we're asking him what he thinks about David Cameron's referendum proposals and what his opinions are on Britain's future with the European Union.
Yeah, I think the timetable for a referendum in 2017, I think is exactly the right approach to take now. Europe is changing because of the euro crisis. It will probably require treaty change or a new agreement between the European countries to resolve the financial consequences of the Eurozone crisis. I think that will mean that the member states that are members of the euro, effectively they will become part of a even closer and tighter union than they're in now, which will start to look and feel more like one country with similar rates of tax, more similar spending levels. That's going to be the necessary action to resolve the euro crisis and keep the eurozone together. The question then comes, well, what about Britain? Because we will clearly never be part of the euro, and there are other member states that either don't want to join the euro, or the chance of them being a member of the euro is a very long way off. What is the future for us? What safeguards do we have? Because this new euro bloc will potentially be very powerful, has the power to dominate all of the proceedings of the European Union. So we have the chance over the next few years to negotiate with the Europeans to say, well, we're prepared to let you go ahead in the way you want to, but what do we get in return? There are certain powers that have been given away. I think certainly over areas of employment policy, some of the social policy, which we say actually should be decided by Parliament. It doesn't need to be decided at a European level. There are probably safeguards we would look for the financial sector, which is a very, very important part of the economy of London. So we would say, well, let's have some clarity over what we can do here, what we can protect, and what our membership would look like in 2017. So I think whatever happens, our relationship with Europe is going to change. I think if it stays as it is, I think the chances are the country will look to leave the European Union or establish some new relationship. But we have a chance over the next few years to say, this is what our new deal with Europe could be. What do you, the British people, think? And the public will have the final say. That is absolutely right, because in 2017, the European Union that we joined will be back in the 1970s will be almost unrecognisable from the European Union that exists today. So I think it's right to say, do we still want to stay in this on these new terms? It's right, I think, to have that referendum once we've done the renegotiation, so people know what they're signing up to. They know what staying in will mean, they'll know what coming out would mean, and that's absolutely vital too. So the next few years are going to be critical for our future as a country, and I think the referendum gives us the chance to finally decide whether we feel our future should be in a newly shaped European Union or outside of it. And I think that's going to be a very rigorous debate. From my own view, I think that in terms of what we should do or how I would campaign or how I would vote in that referendum, I think it very much depends on what negotiation we can get, what deal we can get. Now, there are some people that say that it's almost impossible to get an agreement from all those other member states. But I think what David Cameron showed in the negotiations over the EU budget, where he led the negotiations for the first ever cut in the European budget, something which people last year said was impossible to achieve, but he not only achieved it, but was seen right across Europe as the person leading that drive. It shows that you can get a new deal and you can get a change of approach. I think other people in Europe, other governments in Europe are starting to realise that Europe has to change, that it's become too remote from the people, it's too wasteful of its money, it regulates too much, and they want to see change too. So I think it could be possible to build a real coalition for a new type of Europe. And depending on how successful those negotiations are, we will have a much better idea whether we should stay in or leave.
Colin, thank you. So a question would also be, as regards a no vote in Britain and we come outside of the European Union, what would that look like on the ground for us as an independent nation?
I think one thing we have to remember is that Britain could vote to leave the European Union, but we can't abolish it. I think the European Union is here to stay. I think it may change and its membership may change, but the commitment European countries have made to it and their political commitment to it too is very different from how we feel about it. They really do see it as a political project that they've created. I don't think people in Britain have ever seen the European Union in that way. We've always had, I think, a much more transactional view of it. It's principally about trade. Our view of whether it works or not is whether we think it's good for the country, it's good for people's standard of living, creating jobs. If we felt that it wasn't, then we'd probably think we're better off out. And that's the debate we have, and it's very different from other countries. If there was a no vote in the referendum, leaving isn't like it's not like handing back the keys of a flat to an estate agent. You don't just hand the keys back and walk away. You go into a period of negotiation which can take 2 years, where you decide what the new relationship will be. There are lots of trade agreements which we are part of because we're members of the European Union, but we wouldn't be if we left. So we'd have to renegotiate those. There may be things like access to the single market, where we would want a sort of an associate member status, if you like, with the EU, but we would want access to the market as well. That would all have to be negotiated. So it's not entirely clear what leaving would look like. But I think what it would do is it will probably, I think, mean we would have a looser trade-based relationship with the rest of the European Union. European Union is still going to be a very important trading partner for us, whether we're members or not. Lorries are still going to be going through the Channel Tunnel, through the port of Dover. There will still be trade. We will still have a very close working relationship with the EU, and we want that to be as amicable as possible. As the Prime Minister said when he took the Conservative Party out of the European People's Party grouping, he was moving to a situation where we were, instead of being bad tenants, we're becoming good neighbours. And I think if we left the European Union, we would want to be a good neighbour of the European Union.
You mentioned that the referendum was coming at a very timely point in the history of the European Union. And do you think that public opinion is changing on this issue, and thus the Conservative Party are responding aptly to that change in opinion?
Well, I think opinion has hardened over the last few years against the European Union. I think that's because at a time of austerity, people question, and rightly question, how the country spends its money, what the government spends its money on. And they say, well, do we feel we're getting enough back out of the European Union? There's been a massive expansion of European power through the last few treaties as well into everyday working life, and people sort of question those rules and regulations, and they feel a sense of powerlessness that regulations that have come from Europe can't be removed. I think one of the problems the European Union has as an institution is it has no reverse gear. It brings in policies. It comes into space that was previously occupied by the national governments and parliaments, but it never retreats from them, and that is part of the frustration people feel. So I think it's built up from a number of things, but also there are many people that want to have a relationship with Europe where they can travel freely, do business. People have holiday homes and investments in the European Union. A lot of people work for businesses which are registered in other European Union countries. If you look at this part of the United Kingdom, a lot of the major employers, companies like Eurotunnel and EDF, who run Dungeness Power Station, well, those are French companies. So a lot of people will reasonably ask the question, well, what would it mean for us and our jobs if we weren't members of the EU? And that's why I think it's right we have this process of debate and negotiation before the referendum comes. I know there are some people who'd like a referendum tomorrow because they want to get out as quickly as possible, but I think, in fairness, most people want to understand, what will this mean for me? I think the majority of people would actually like to go back to a relationship with the EU, which is more like the common market which we joined in the 1970s. What we will discover over the next few years is whether that is possible.
Thank you very much.